And now it's time for Development Debates, where we dig deeper into some of the questions shaping the future and present of China. Today we will see Chinese experts discuss the necessity of the Chinese Marshall Plan. In 2013, China announced a plan to revive the Silk Road, which was a series of trade and cultural transmission routes 1,000 years ago. The government has set up a special fund with just over $16 billion to finance infrastructure construction located on this route. This money will help build railways, pipelines, and roads along this route in Chinese provinces. This action is called the Chinese Marshall Plan. With the establishment of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Chinese Marshall Plan will receive even more money. The Marshall Plan is somewhat like when the United States gave $17 billion to Europe to help rebuild European economies after the end of World War II. And the Chinese Marshall Plan seems to have similar strategies in which China will also invest $586 billion overseas. This number accounts for 7% of the Chinese GDP. The Chinese government will invest in ports, roads, and railway construction projects overseas by giving appropriate governments funding. Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and Central Asia are just a few of the locations. In the end, the project will have spent a little over an astounding $21 trillion. Many Chinese are debating whether it is necessary or not to have the so-called China Marshall Plan, and many Chinese experts hold different opinions towards it. Qi Junjie is a financial commentator. He believes China needs this plan. The Chinese Marshall Plan will first solve the excess capacity by helping the emerging market countries and underdeveloped countries along the route develop infrastructure. Right now, China's steel, cement, and cable reserves are all overflowing. So constructing this new Silk Road will provide an opportunity to use these materials and help boost economies in those countries. Also, a significant function of the Marshall Plan is to accumulate political power by partnering with the countries along the route. The Chinese Marshall Plan will help China to get support from countries by providing aid. Underdeveloped areas like the Maldives are thrilled. They recognize before a country can be profitable, well-functioning roads are necessary. Furthermore, this project will showcase a softer side of China, while boosting trade throughout Eurasia. This is China's favored win-win situation, boosting image and regional influence. However, not all people agree with Qi. A journalist from Taijing.com.cn doesn't believe the so-called Chinese Marshall Plan has the same meaning as the U.S.'s Marshall Plan. He mentions that the U.S. plan was based on the premise that Europe after World War II faced severe economic, social, and political problems. However, now the so-called Chinese Marshall Plan has no such premise. He points out the U.S. plan had a clear intention of aiding Europe, but China is just conducting a somewhat typical investment operation. Moreover, the Marshall Plan and the so-called Chinese Marshall Plan have adopted different ways of exporting capital. He also mentions the position of Chinese yuan doesn't allow China to fully play out the Chinese Marshall Plan. When the United States was conducting its Marshall Plan, the GDP had risen by 7%, and the establishment of the Bretton Woods system was because of the Marshall Plan. This system, named after the place it was created in, created the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, allowing for the investment in Europe. In establishing this system, America consolidated its overlord status. As for China, it's hard to believe they can achieve the same thing via capital exports to Europe. It is widely held that the U.S. enacted a Marshall Plan in Europe after World War II as a way of establishing itself as a world power, also as a way to support foreign policy. Clearly, China has similar ambitions with the new Silk Road project. Many believe they hope their Silk Road will reap the same rewards.